I think we're gonna go ahead and it's 8:31. I will call the April 3rd regular meeting of the Environment and Land Use Committee to order. Roll call committee members, Kellen Nelson,
Randy Severson. What's that?
David Larson,
Tony Munson.
Don, Stacy. Can you hear us?
Stacy Klein.
Okay, good. Just making sure. And staff, we have
Becky Gluen.
Good morning, Susan Fisher, Corp Counsel.
Haley.
Haley Passo.
Verge Gamera, Department of Land Management.
Dave Carlson, Economic Development Manager.
Mark Carlson, Land Management.
I certify that open meeting law requirements have been met with proper posting. We have a 14-item agenda. Any changes or additions? Hearing none.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes of our March 6th regular meeting? Any corrections or additions to that?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes from March 6th, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. So, it is 8:32. I will call the public hearing to order for a conditional use permit for a farm home business accessory greenhouse from Fankhauser Family Farms. Randy, would you read the call?
This is the notice of public hearing for a conditional use permit for a farm home business accessory. There will be a public hearing held before the Trempealeau County Environment and Land Use Committee on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024, at 8:30 a.m. in the County Boardroom Courthouse, 18600 Hobson Street, Whitehall, Wisconsin. The purpose is to consider a conditional use permit, farm home business accessory for a greenhouse. The location is the town of Arcadia, Trempealeau County. The hearing was requested by the Fankhauser Family Farms LLC, Arcadia, Wisconsin, landowner petitioner. Your attendance and comments are encouraged at this hearing. If you are unable to attend and have any questions, please call Mark Carlson with the Department of Land Management at 715-538-1919 or email to markcarlson@county.trempealeau.wisconsin.us. If you are unable to attend and desire to submit a written comment, please send your written comments to the Department of Land Management, 18600 Hobson Street, Whitehall, Wisconsin, 54773, or email to, once again, Mark Carlson. Please know that written comments will be read at the public hearing up to 250 words. All written comments must include the name and address of its author. Any special interest groups or expert witnesses will be allowed 20 minutes to give a presentation and must register at least 1 week prior to the meeting date by calling Mark Carlson of the Department of Land Management at 715-538-1919. Sincerely, Mark Carlson, Zoning and Sanitary Specialist.
Thank you, Randy. Mark, do you have any comments you can offer us?
Not really. I mean, I was approached by Chad that he wanted to do this type of activity, and I think based on our ordinance, the best place it would fall into would be the farm home business accessory, which would require a conditional use. Only thing I got from the public would have been the town of Arcadia. I guess included with their application, and I believe it's in your materials, is they kind of spelled out, like 16 factors that we consider when we do look at a conditional use permit. And they answered every one of the questions quite clearly, and, it's pretty obvious, that they're specific about their operating hours, things like that. I mean, I think it's spelled out pretty well. Nobody else called, got no emails from any other person from the general public, and that's pretty much it on my end.
Okay. Thank you. If anyone wishes to offer public comment, I don't believe we've had anyone sign up to speak to this. Okay. Chad, do you have anything you'd like to add, or Okay. Again, if anyone wishes to offer public comment on it, this is your time. Can you read the letter from the town for us?
The letter from the town was dated February 28th after the last meeting. In regards to Fankhauser Farms LLC conditional use permit. The town of Arcadia Board of Supervisors was informed by Chad Fankhauser on behalf of Fankhauser Farms LLC that is requesting a conditional use permit for a greenhouse. The town of Arcadia Board of Supervisors unanimously passed a motion at their February 28th, 2024 board meeting stating that they are in support of this request. Sincerely, Lynn Axness, Clerk, Town of Arcadia.
Thank you. Again, if anybody wishes to offer comment on it, this is your last chance. Hearing and seeing nobody, I will close the public comment at 8:37 and entertain a motion from the committee.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Discussion, questions from the committee for staff or the Fankhauser's?
Questions come to mind for me. Number one, the sanitary thing, it just says possible. If you're having the public in there on a regular basis, maybe a porta potty would be an advisable thing.
I mean, it's something you can come out and speak to if you want to, Chad.
I guess we hadn't really planned on it, but, you know, if it's necessary, then we would have to do it, but.
I guess I have, I know I've been to other greenhouses where they don't have that.
Not many.
I guess personally, I'm going somewhere, I used facilities elsewhere prior, just my opinion. I mean, there's even some businesses I know that you can't access a bathroom, where there's a sign posted, no public bathroom. And normally people aren't at a greenhouse very long, you know, enough to get plants and be on their way. I guess that's my opinion, but.
But if you expect people coming from a little distance, that's one of the first things some people need to do if they get out of a car.
True.
Me.
Okay,
I mean, if,
I guess, would you consider it an undue expense or? I have
Well,
idea
no.
I know they're all over the place, but I have no idea what the cost of it is.
to rent one for a month or months at a time is not super cheap.
they're probably about $100 a month, roughly.
Yeah.
And being a new business, you know, our expense, we're trying to keep our
Low.
our
yeah.
budget, yeah, we have trying to watch our expenses.
Well, it's nothing that we, you know, can't do. I mean, certainly we could, you know, if we have to, so.
Sure,
I'm not gonna insist on it, it was just.
question, sure. I think you can use your own discretion on that, seems like.
Yeah,
So
I mean.
if there would be a complaint, 6 months from now, you would know that there was a concern and.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Just
we're
take
only
care of it.
open May to maybe July,
2 or 3 months.
whenever our
Yeah.
plant stock runs out. And if it does, come up where someone's asking, you know, at that time, we would definitely consider.
Get one pretty quick too as needed, so,
Yeah, I mean, we are open to it, it's just budget purposes.
understood.
And if it does become where we're that busy and have that many customers, we'll definitely
Sure.
consider it.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments?
Just looking at the maps out here. Let me see where where is the greenhouse going to sit in that property?
Mm-hmm. I had the same question, actually, from the
Can
map.
you guys make sure you're on?
Oh, turn your mic on.
Sorry, Stacy.
Yeah.
It'd actually be right in here.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So then that answers my next question, which was, is there access to it? You know, I was looking like behind the other building, if that was the case, was that an issue with, but if it's there, it's right, full access.
Easy access.
Right, yep. That's all I've got.
You're looking at just having one greenhouse at this time,
Yes.
building?
We're gonna see how things go. You know, if we do really well, you know, we have hopes of maybe eventually expanding and maybe making it more of a commercial thing, but yeah, at the moment, it's just one greenhouse, but it's a wait and see, you know? Maybe it won't go well and we tried. Just thought bringing a local business, you know, opening up another local business to the area is a good thing, so.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
How large will the greenhouse be?
That's a 12 by 60.
okay.
I would just say thank you for investing and starting that business, and we appreciate it very much. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, my goal would be to do something a little different. This area doesn't have anybody that raises like tomatoes year-round, you know, to get fresh tomatoes year-round. You have to buy them from the store, which come out of Mexico or California, or,
Right.
so kind of like to, that's not gonna happen this year, but, you know, if it goes well enough, that's kind of the plan down the road too.
It's a goal.
Right.
Sure.
Maybe we can reach sometime.
That'd
Yeah,
be very
thank you.
cool. Okay, any other questions from the committee? Hearing none. All in favor of approving this conditional use permit, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. You guys have a permit.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Good luck. Thank you.
Good luck, get planting. Planting the snow.
Any questions down the road?
Oh, you all know where we're located.
Yeah.
Say, I might have to be one of your first customers.
We opened, we're aiming to open the first weekend in May, so.
Okay. So I will call the next public hearing to order at 8:43. And this is in regards to amendments to our comprehensive zoning ordinance. Randy, do you have,
I have it on the.
okay.
Please take notice that pursuant to Wisconsin statute 59.69, para 2, para E, the Trempealeau County Environment and Land Use Committee will hold a public hearing to consider minor amendments to the Trempealeau County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, which are as follows. Number one, petition to amend ordinance by the town of Albion to reinstate the allowance for transfer of density, formerly section 3.04, para E. Number two, amendment to chapter 4, section 4.07 to allow camping cabins to be used as a type of camping unit in a campground. And number three, amendment to chapter 18 with new definitions in regards to camping cabins. Please be further advised that this public hearing will be held on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024 at 8:35 a.m. in the county board room of the courthouse located at 18600 Hobson Street, Whitehall, Wisconsin, 54773. Prior to the public hearing, copies of the proposed minor amendments may be viewed or obtained at the offices of the Trumbull County Department of Land Management and the Trumbull County Clerk at 18600 Hobson Street, Whitehall, Wisconsin, 54773. To request that a copy of these amendments be mailed to you, please contact the Department of Land Management at 715-538-1919 or email to Mark Carlson at county.trempealeau.wisconsin.us. The zoning ordinance amendments may also be accessed and viewed online at www.county.trempealeau.wisconsin.us. Written comments will be accepted by the Environment and Land Use Committee until April 2nd, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. Comments can be emailed to Mark Carlson or mailed to the Department of Land Management.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, so, we got a whole bunch to go unpack in this one, I think.
The chapter 3 one was initiated by a letter from the town of Albion, which we looked at as a petition to change. That's why we're having the public hearing, and language in the ordinance was removed. And they're requesting it to be put back in there. And the language in red in your packet is the language that was in the ordinance originally. I've just put the same language. I mean, Sherry Nelson here is here, she's from the township of Albion. Every township in the county was notified, via, they had to respond and acknowledge receipt. None of them have had any input as far as, what they feel about it. And nobody from the public called about it either, so.
Okay, if anyone wishes to offer public comment on it, this is the time. We have one registered to testify, Ms. Sherry. Would you like to speak to the group? Sure. Yeah, if you want to take a.
Ken, before Sherry starts, did everybody, in our packet was the letter from the township? Did everybody get a chance to read that letter? Okay.
This, okay. Okay, I guess I want to start by saying our town chair would be here also, but he is working on some health issues. So, and if everyone read the letter, that basically puts out our position on it. And we have, the town of Albion spent a lot of time on our land use goals when we set everything up. And what this amendment did, or not amendment, what the original part of the ordinance or whatever, allowed us to meet our goals as they were outlined in the land use plan. And the town of Albion has a firm policy of not doing spot zoning. We spent a lot of time on our land use plan, and we stand behind it, and we did a thorough review of it whenever the reviews came up a few years ago, and we made no changes. I mean, we had a large committee, and we spent an enormous amount of time on it. So, and the town of Albion already set precedent within our township by arranging this and allowing the using of this chapter 3.04 of the ordinance several years ago in a completely unrelated area across the township that of other areas that we're looking at. So, and we also feel that if we did rezone the property, which we do not do spot zoning, but if we did rezone it to rural residential, that would allow four houses per 40 acres, and that is clearly in opposition to the goals and objectives of the town. We want to keep it as it was and just allow. The other thing that this does is we have a lot of large landowners with landlocked 40s, or we're in the hills. There is not a lot of flat land in our township. And for access purposes, driveways, and to be safe, there are often times when you might have all the land, but clearly you don't want to build where you can't have a safe driveway or access to your property. Do you have any questions?
I don't have questions, but as probably obvious by now, I am part of this committee in Albion. And another concern I would have, if the rezone were to take place, of a potential legal issue based on a couple of years ago of absolutely rejecting the rezone, and caused consternation among some people. So now, if you were to agree to rezone to something like this, you open yourself up for, I think, legal issues from another issue.
I'm not familiar with the history behind the reasoning for eliminating the particular verbiage. I think we talked about it a little bit at our last meeting, but can you remind me, why was it removed in the first place?
My understanding, it was just something that it's kind of hard to keep track of whose density was transferred. You know, it's not necessarily on their deed correctly sometimes, you know, that could all probably be corrected. But it's something that hasn't been used, but maybe 2, 3 times in the last 20 years. And I guess it was just felt that based on being able to track who transferred what to where, you know, because, and Joe Nelson's here, our surveyor, you know, he can answer some questions too, but I mean, I know they're against rezoning, you know, for spot zoning, which is probably a good thing to not want to do. But by allowing people to transfer to this property, they could just as well have just as many houses on that parcel as if they would have went through the rezone. You know, you gotta really be careful on, I mean, if someone has 500 acres, they shouldn't be able to transfer 20 to one parcel, you know. So, I mean, that's why it was removed, you know, back, you know, the past administrator was more involved with it than myself, but, it was removed because of the lack of use of that portion of the ordinance and also the trackability of, you know, just keeping track of it all. You know, if someone buys a piece of property, say they buy a 40, and all of a sudden they want to put something on it or split it up, and all of a sudden the density had been transferred off of there to somebody, a different property. It's just hard to keep track of.
Can I say something to that? Our intention is to not allow further density beyond the 35 acres, but to be able to transfer it. Am I saying this right? I think I am. But our intention is not to allow 4 residences on a 40. We're talking about, or 35 or whatever it is. We would want to keep the same density, but, you know, if you have one parcel that's not buildable, or it might be buildable, but it's not safe to be there, or it might not be buildable either, but then to just transfer that one, not to allow 4 or more on 140. We want the density to stay the same.
I wonder if the language that was used in the past and has been proposed to use again is a little too vague then. Because currently it would stand to reason that you could transfer any density within the zoning, of course. But what you're suggesting is that you wouldn't want to transfer the density to the degree that would be possible under this ordinance. So if it's something that we're considering, is there language that could be used to be a little bit more detailed, or does that just muddy it even more as far as keeping track of and all of that?
I was thinking along that same line, that to add some kind of word, I don't have the words figured out, but something along the line that the receiving parcel can only receive one time to be added. That would keep from happening what is being talked about. But I don't know exactly the words.
I'm going to actually ask Joe if he can weigh in on this. And also if you could talk about any sort of deed restrictions, that'd be helpful.
Going back to the history a little bit, sometimes we have a better scope on what we maybe need to do in the future if we look at the history a little bit more. The history allowed us to transfer density from one parcel to another if it was directly across the road, like the ordinance, the previous ordinance said. Mark had touched on the reasons why it was changed. One being that lack of use. Two being the confusion when somebody buys that parcel across the road where the density was transferred. A lot of times that's not picked up in the title search. It should be. But quite frankly, it's not always. And so they end up buying a parcel they think they can divide, and come to find out they can't. The density's gone now. That's an issue. Whether or not we should be concerned about that issue, I'll leave that to the committee. And the other issue is the spot zoning issue. What could happen is, if all that density was transferred, and Mark touched on this also, is that you would have the appearance of a residential 40 out in the middle of a farm field. In this particular case that brought this issue to a head, if I did my calculations properly, they could put 5 new parcels in that, or that ag parcel. Well, if that doesn't look like a residential development to me, I don't know what does. So the appearance of 4 lots per 40 or residential use is pretty obvious. And then the question comes in, well, how was it that they were able to put a residential use in an agricultural parcel without a rezone? And that's a valid question. So that's one of the issues. Those would be what I would consider the cons to changing it back. The pros are, obviously, you don't have to do a rezone. It's much more efficient for somebody who wants to build one home for a family member off the family farm. It happens quite often. So that's probably the biggest pro. Those are the cons. As far speaking to the possibility of revising the ordinance, I think the way it's written right now is quite vague, or the way it was written was quite vague, and it allowed a lot more than both what Sherry's talked about and what some of the committee members have talked about. I think we would have to look at not only the number of new parcels created, but we'd also have to look maybe at which type of zoning would allow for a density transfer. If you had an R20 use across the road and an ag across the other road, how much of the R20 could be transferred? It gets rather confusing on which type of zone it is. If it were specific to a specific zoning type, like maybe exclusive ag 2 only or primary ag only, then it'd be much easier to write an ordinance that would be much more effective and easier to enforce. That's my
pretty
2 cents.
logical. I like that thought of it's gotta be same, EA2, for example.
That's what we're actually talking about, is that classification of property right now. I mean, whether we gotta do it on a case-by-case basis, I don't know. And I don't know which you were talking about could set precedents before for legal action, or where it was. If it was safety, drive met all the other requirements, I don't know.
Highway access,
Was the issue?
all kinds of stuff like that.
Well, then it's pretty self-explanatory, but here they meet all of the requirements because they're only 4 acres short basically of what's the 40.
Yep. So,
Would designating certain zones solve the issue for town of Albion, or is that going to be a challenging issue as to which ones we would designate?
Sherry can speak to it too, but I would not, if we designated the primary ag and ag 2 as the only ones you can do this in, I think would fit Albion's needs nicely.
Yes. And the other part of this, should I be speaking up there? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No,
No.
they won't be able to.
I guess the other part of this is that it really doesn't require correct me if I'm wrong, the 35 acres, but they want 70?
Yep.
So it isn't necessarily the 35 acres for a density. It actually requires 70 to be able to build. And you can maybe explain that better than I can.
I think what Sherry's talking about is if it's in exclusive ag 2 with no existing dwellings, in order to divide, you would need, and match the density, you would need at least 70 acres because the density is 1 split per every 35 acres. So if you have 69 acres, you don't meet the requirement for the density in order to split. I think that's what you're talking about.
That's where you need a conditional use, because that's what we have done in the town of Unity. Because we did that for one parcel a couple of years ago. It had 67 acres. And actually, they built on the smaller part. They didn't build on the 35, they built on the front part.
So that was maybe a variance?
Nope. Conditional use through
Well,
here.
I think Mark could speak to the conditional use. I don't know if that would fall under a conditional use
I'd have to find out which individual you're speaking of, but I don't think that would be a conditional use. So it'd be a rezone.
Right, it was rezoned under a conditional use is what we did, I believe. I can talk to you privately on that or
Sure,
whatever.
yeah,
but I mean,
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it, I'm not gonna deny it.
No,
I mean, if
I
it
don't know,
happened,
but
it
I don't
happened.
remember
but
what we did, but
I
I do
don't
know there
recall
was
the details
67
on it.
acres there that,
Right.
and they wanted to put a building on there, in which they
Yeah.
did. Because there was a house or a building site already on the 10 acres across the road.
Well, if anyone else wishes to offer public comment on any of these items, now is the time.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So are we changing or looking at changing this ordinance for one person? I mean, that's kind of where I think this is stemming from. So I would just be,
It's stemming from one person, but it has been used in the township
Yeah.
prior.
I'm just
And-
making a statement
Yep,
of,
yep,
you know, just as a thought, just to be cautious if someone, changing a whole ordinance for one person is setting a precedent as well. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Could I
That's
say
all.
something to that? We have used it in the past, and we will use it in the future if we can. And it is our way of addressing a problem that, according to our land use plan, we don't want, and we are not doing this for one person in any way, shape, or form. It's like, it's not for one person. We've used it in the past, and we would use it again in the future, I'm sure. But it has nothing to do with any single person.
Right, I think
Just, we have
most-
one person because it came up.
Right, there always has to be a catalyst to bring something forward.
Yeah.
Does it meet everyone's needs, or is there any reason to not consider going forward with amending the ordinance to indicate the ag and the, I'm sorry, I forget my zoning, but,
I haven't sat down and tried to do the words to, but I would be willing at the proper time to offer an amendment that limits it to primary ag and ag 2, and possibly limits the receiving proper parcel to once only, not that this time we can do it from this 40, and 2 years from now, we can take it from over here and create what the concern is with Joe. So, yeah,
Good morning. I would like to speak from a staff perspective. I'd like to know if anyone from the town of Albion has ever actually filled out the paperwork for a transfer density. It's complicated. You're dealing with land descriptions. I have done it, and it gets complicated, very complicated. So not only do you have the paperwork that is very intense and complicated, but also, again, we go back to the tracking part of it. It's a document that's filed at the Register of Deeds. If that is not picked up by a title company or something, someone is buying land that they have no idea has no zoning density on it, and they basically wouldn't be able to do maybe what they want to do on it. I think if the Land Records Department was here, they could talk more on the tracking because they actually do it. It's a little more complicated than just creating a layer of mapping. And there's a lot more elements that go with this. And like I said, from a staff perspective who's actually done, these, it's very time-consuming. So that's all I have to say.
I was involved in the one we did do, and I don't specifically recall the paperwork end of it. I mean, I do so many things, and it's been a little while, but I also think in terms of the tracking, first of all, it's not necessarily our job to do the title company's job. And the title company is paid to research these things, and it would be at the Register of Deeds, and this is what they do. similar to any other kind of thing that affects the land. And then, as far as tracking them, my thinking is you might be able to put a layer in the mapping of the county or something on that order. Again, it would be like land records could do it, but I think it's a doable project, and it can be done to the betterment of everyone.
Would perhaps the next most appropriate step be to involve land records in what that would look like? And, because I think it is a viable concern that somebody who might buy a property could get something that they didn't know, right? And even though it's not, you're right, the title company is supposed to do their search. I think it's our responsibility to be sure that whatever it is that we can put into place to make sure that the title company does pick up that scenario is an important way of protecting future buyers before we take action.
Well, and the future seller, if they're doing any kind of disclosure report, which they usually do, would also need to disclose that. So that would be one more layer of letting the buyers know.
That does take into us, consider this. So sometimes parents have properties and then children need to come in and help deal with properties. Currently in that circumstance, I would have no idea what happened with that property, and my parents aren't able to tell me.
Right.
That's true. But there's exceptions to everything. And in general, if it's recorded and easily accessed at the time, it really shouldn't be made problematic.
I'd recommend that we involve land records as a next step to investigate what that could look like.
Mark, comment?
I mean, we had discussions with land records, and I guess Nick was gonna be here, but he had some other things going on, but I think they have the same viewpoint as our staff has brought up. You know, as far as them being able to track it and monitor it better than it's being monitored, I guess, I'm sure they're capable of doing that, but I guess their point of, their input was similar to ours as far as the biggest thing was the tracking. Nick was gonna show a view of a property, of an example of one that did go this transfer, and it showed it, like, this year, there was like 1 lot, and next year there was 3 lots, and then that showed the progress of what was allowed because of that, and I guess unfortunately, he couldn't be here for that, but as far as their input, I think it would be similar concerns as our department had.
I think Nick's example basically showed what we were talking about. It started with 1 transfer. At the end of the, or at current time now, I think there's been 4. So what was an exclusive ag use and still exclusive ag use looks like a residential development. And every one of them complied with the ordinance.
We are not looking to do that, and I think language to prohibit that kind of transfer would be acceptable.
Okay.
Just,
We do not want that kind of density anywhere.
Sherry touched in her talking a little bit about Albion's, what we put together in the land use. Our intent in our land use was a 2-acre minimum lot per 35 acres, period. When it got to the county zoning regs, there was no slot for that. So our land use plan was put into this lot size minimum 35, which it was not what our land use plan stated. This thing, although it a little complicated, allowed for the exceptions to come through to this and make it work for the people of the town. And now that it's gone, there is no way for a person to do, in this case, let his daughter build a house on this particular property. Because in this person's mind at this time that brought it forth, this is where they want to build. It's on a hill, it's not in, the view is what they want and the whole works. But if, and this is the idea of rezone, if it were to happen, would allow for more and take away from the idea of keeping everything we can in agricultural production. I realize there's extra work for the staff, but I do feel we have very qualified staff, and it can be done and can be useful to a larger number of people at some future time. I would have no, matter of fact, if I could get some help with the wording when we get to it, I would have no objection to putting a couple of restrictions on this.
Understanding that the ultimate decision is with the committee, one thing that you could do is provide us with the direction that you want and then send it back to staff, and staff come back next month with the language that's drafted, hopefully to address some of the concerns that were raised. You know, we're talking about, you know, where, you know, whether we need to put a zoning district in there, whether it's gonna be consistent with maximum density standards, whether we want any sort of, I'm using deed restriction, but that might not be the best term, but some sort of thing to address that. Maybe if we could just give it a pause, you give us the direction of what you want, we work on the language, bring it back. We would have to have a public hearing on it again, because I think it's still a zoning amendment. It's different than what was proposed, but we could continue this discussion next month.
Thoughts from the committee?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that's a good idea and probably is the right next step. But one other question that comes to mind for me, remember that I'm not real well versed in zoning. Is this something that can be addressed through conditional use or other rezones?
Yes.
Yes, but the rezone that it would go to goes against the town board's, or the town's wishes in their land use plan.
Conditional use option?
No.
I don't,
But there is a rezone option.
It would be a rezone option.
Okay.
They wish not to go down that avenue.
Right, because that would allow for like 4 houses per 35 or whatever, rather than just one transfer of density, right? That's what you're.
Mark, do you remember what density they wanted to go to?
I don't think they had any specific, all they wanted to do was being able to split it once to allow for a family member to have a home. And their case would be, you know, they have a 35-acre piece or whatever it is, and they'd have one, it'd be split, you know, like 2 acres and then 33. They didn't specify exactly what density, but that's what their intent was in their case.
If I remember right, they'd have to go down to a residential density, which would be R8, which would open up the door to additional parcels, would prohibit certain agricultural uses. So it's kind of an oranges and apples use.
One of the things that I think of when I'm considering this is that currently, there are probably a fair handful of scenarios where there are a lot of benefits to potentially having a house built next to another house on a 40, right? Like, maybe you have aging parents, and so it makes sense for you to have a dwelling near them to be able to assist them. Or maybe for lack of childcare, you want to build close to parents who then can help with daycare and other things like that. I think there's a lot of really neat, or not neat, but applicability potentially for this, and that could open the door to address some of the other issues that we see in the county related to housing, childcare, caring for elderly, that type of thing in rural areas. So I'm real interested in doing this, but I do want to be very careful that we do it in a way that's thoughtful and maybe a little bit more restrictive than what the language is now. So I don't know, do we need to do a motion to move forward as what Susan had recommended?
I that's what someone would like to do, we can certainly do that.
Where are we at? Have we closed the public hearing?
No,
and we're
because
in-
we have two other issues that haven't been talked about even yet, and it's all in the same public hearing.
Okay.
So, it's a lot.
So for this particular issue, I would like to make a motion that we revisit the language and specifications on the transfer of density and bring it back to public hearing next month.
Okay. We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Do we have a second? Any other discussion on that motion?
And this, isn't neither here nor there, but I just wondered why they'd be so scared of a rezone. If they're gonna retain ownership and it went to R8, what would they be scared of?
It's not the property owner,
It's the township.
town board.
Town board.
It's not the property owner, it's the town board.
So that's kind of restricting the residents too.
It is a little bit. It's what was put together in the land use plan.
And the committee that put together the land use plan was from all over the township. It wasn't just any bakery from the corner. And we've never had a complaint when it was set up.
Are we seeing this issue in many other towns?
No.
No.
I don't
And
believe so.
and I think, if you boil this down as to why it was eliminated from the language, 2 years ago, I wanna say it was? It had to do with the lack of use, largely.
I
So
would-
is there a need for the language when we have another avenue by which to address this? That's, nutshell, go ahead.
Just for the record, I think I mentioned R8 is what it would have to be rezoned to. It's actually R4.
Just talking about the land use plan, I would assume that there were a lot of public hearings done during that process as well, so that there was input from other town members in saying that was the direction that they wanted to go. And so, I mean, that's a big process as well. And so that, you have to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, in regard to that, my recollection is, I think when we started looking at this, we had 35 to 40 people showing up at our meetings, which, based on town meetings, is a pretty large number. It did weed down to probably 18 to 20 by the time we were actually putting it all together.
We put effort into looking at pretty much every single piece. And then we also went through and this is a few years back and eliminated, what did we do when we got some of the commercial things that were grandfathered in? Didn't we go through and eliminate some of them?
I think, yeah,
How did that work?
Yeah, some were, that's probably 6-8 years ago that we cleaned up a whole lot of that stuff.
Cleaned it all up because
Yeah.
it was no longer being used that way.
Right.
Because there were certain things that kind of ended up being grandfathered in.
Is someone talking? I can't hear.
Right, yeah. So we do have a motion on the floor with a second. So, any other pertinent discussion of the motion?
Well, do you wish to define it more? I mean, put a restriction in there or
That's
research
more or
that
less what
first?
the motion is,
Yeah.
to send it back and let staff work on more restrictive language and continue and have a public hearing again next month, really, what it amounts to.
My question is it required that staff put this, is it required that we cannot amend this today and move on with it? Is that against the rules?
No, you could amend it if you wished.
Okay.
Yeah, my suggestion was also to recognize some of the concerns that were being expressed and to give an opportunity to address that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to postpone it to next month and work on revision of language. call the vote, I think. Oh, Stacy?
I had one more quick question. So, say we, redo the verbiage, does that have to go back out to all the towns again for their notice? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay,
Well,
all right.
Question, in regard to Stacy's question, if we amend here, it all has to go out to the towns again? Or only,
If we also look at this next month, because what staff will do is provide another modification, with different language. It's not going to be the same as what was proposed, and so we need to make sure that we are still publicly holding that hearing, that we are continuing that. That conversation occurs through the statute, right? 5969 provides the mechanism that if you're going to amend the zoning ordinance, that you have to have a public hearing. So we need to make sure that we are continuing that forward, is what I'm essentially saying.
so what I'm hearing is if we were to amend this today and pass it through, that would be a no-no.
If you amended it today, you would not be required to have a public hearing later on because you'd be amending it today.
Okay,
During a public hearing.
Yep.
during a public hearing, okay.
So, that being said, it's time to vote on this motion. All in favor of moving this back and working on the language and bring it back in May, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, who is that?
Stacy, me, and Randy.
Dawn, Randy.
All opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Who were the three? Stacy. Okay, Randy, Stacy, and Dawn. Okay. Okay, thank you.
All opposed?
Aye.
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 And did Dave vote
I'm negative,
for number one? Nay.
Nay.
no.
Motion fails.
No, yep.
So wait,
It's 3-3.
who voted for the first one?
Stacy, Dawn, and Randy.
Okay,
Yeah, and then against was, and Dave and
Kellen.
Tony
Kellen.
voted
Against.
against it, and Kellen voted against it,
And
then
Dave
Dave.
against.
Dave.
so 3-3.
So that's tied.
Motion fails when it's,
Motion failed?
Yep.
Thank you.
So,
Propose a new motion? You propose a new motion?
I will attempt to propose a motion, subject to wording adjustments. And amend two, make this applicable only to primary ag and ag 2, and limit the receiving parcel to one time only.
And that was which ag districts? Exclusive ag?
Primary ag and ag 2.
Primary ag?
I'll just, do we need a second before we can
we need a
discuss?
second before we should discuss.
Second.
Okay, now discuss.
Not opposed to that language change happening today. I'm interested in understanding how we can make this easily or more easily evident in a transfer or a title search so that anyone who is looking to purchase this property doesn't get into something that they didn't intend to.
Theoretically, it would have to be surveyed off of the original, so there's a survey which should be recorded, which if everybody does their due diligence properly, it would be identified, but how things slip through the cracks, correct?
My question with this verbiage, does this make this better, worse, or no different for staff?
That'd be more-
As far as tracking, without something that guarantees that it's gonna be there's a tracking mechanism, it makes it worse.
That's kind of where I was thinking it might be going.
So as far as relating it to a specific zoning type and a specific number of transfers, it makes it more manageable from that perspective. But to me, the tracking is pretty important.
Right.
because this office, the zoning office, gets calls every day from people that are saying, what can we do with my property? What we don't want to say is, well, give me 30 days to research things. A, we don't have time. They don't have time.
Right.
This is usually an over-the-counter thing where we're expected to give answers. And quite frankly, we like to give answers over the counter immediately if we can. So without a good tracking mechanism, that aspect is pretty much gone from the over-the-counter visits, the phone call contacts.
Is there not some creative way that could be used to track this? I don't know how that works, but thinking outside of the box, is there some way that this could be accomplished that we're currently haven't thought about?
Well, let's go back for a little history again. In the ordinance, there used to be a line that said the county will provide a density map so that we had that ability. We could just look at the map. We could say, okay, your property's got 2 densities left, done deal. That density map, come to find out, is nearly impossible to build because it relies on so much data that's timed that the county just doesn't have. So what happens when somebody calls and says, well, can I put another lot in this Ag 2 zoning? We basically have to sit down and go through a quasi-title search back to 1970 to see how many times this property's been split.
And can't that responsibility be put on the person asking, they have to do their own title search to find out then, right? If we can't provide that information, they have to pay to have the title search done to know how to use their property.
We could do that. We could require a title search on each piece of property. The question would become, is that excessive expectation financially for somebody? I guess that's not I don't have an answer for that. But sure, we could do that. We could say, before you divide your property and have any questions for staff, we want to see a title search. I mean, we could do that. I've worked in probably 15 to 20 counties. I've never seen that done unless it's a multi-million-dollar land title survey, or if it's a subdivision pertaining to numerous lots, then of course that's more applicable. But yes, to answer your question, sure, we could do that. We could require a title search. And then we're kind of back to the people who are doing the title search coming to us for the elements of the search. So it kind of is just a circular pointing of who's going to be responsible for all this. It's, in my mind, wanting to solve problems. If we had the ability to identify this property, when somebody contacts us, that would solve the problem and we can move on to the next problem. And that's, quite frankly, is what necessitated this change in the ordinance originally. We want to solve problems. We want to be able to resolve people's issues as soon as we can so we can move on to the next issue.
But really, if we could accomplish this by rezoning to an R4, or whatever that is, that gives you 4 on your 40. Why is that not acceptable?
Maybe Sherry can answer better than me, because I'm not on town board. I just happen to go to all their meetings. But that is not the wishes of the town board, based on our public hearings, whatever meetings over 20 years ago, and even on now with the latest, when did, two or 3 years ago now, we did the relook of it, and it was all, this is what we want, this is the way we want it. And no rezones out of Ag 1 or Ag 2 unless it's nearer to the village of Oliva.
Generally, again, their land use plan put together through all their public input they don't want that much density. And to consider, it is generally, I guess, the feeling overall is that it is better for people to have more housing density in villages and cities where there is water and sewer hookup, that you're in a system.
We do have a specific areas, I mean, we went through this too, of what we consider to be transitional ag, and this falls way out of that, where anything, not this particular property, but anything outlying in the ag areas are not considered to be in the transitional ag. So we did address that in depth when we put together the land use plan of what would be transitional ag. Is that how you remember it? Yeah. Do you have any questions on that?
I have a question. Like, how solid is a township land use plan in a court challenge with an owner? If an owner decides he wants to do something outside of the township's wishes?
That's a good question.
I think it's a good question, and I think the answer is gonna be, it depends on the circumstances and the facts that are present. As I think Supervisor Larson mentioned, there is a mechanism through 5969, but the town doesn't want to really get into that battle that can occur between the town and the county.
So even, you have to realize that the town's wishes aren't set in stone, even if we do agree to the density change of ownership.
To me, it's tough. I've wrestled with this one for, I found out about it back in January. And to me, it's a little odd. I mean, I understand the effort that was put into the town and their plan, comprehensive plan, and that's what they all should be like. And they obviously want this to happen because they're going to great lengths to be able to let this person, in my mind, build the house.
At this point, there's one person involved at this
Right,
point.
and
Yep.
it is,
Yep.
yep.
But they have already done it in the past.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's not-
Once, as I understand, I think, in your township. Yep, understood. Yep. And the county and this committee, 2 years ago, removed the language that allowed them to do it for lack of using it, largely. So now what do we do? The county, and it's my viewpoint that the county has a mechanism by which to do these. And I respect their desire to not spot zone, and I get that. I have an issue personally with moving density. It just doesn't make sense to me. So that's my reason for not supporting. I just can't. Not for me.
This is one of those where I'm just thinking about my towns and what they want. And I mean, I could see it potentially coming up as an issue. And I guess that's where I'd like to have a little bit more, I guess, clarity and time to go back to them, have those discussions during their meetings. We do have a lot of new board members, in the last couple of years that might not be familiar and aware of how all of this works. So I guess I would like to have more time just to see what they want in representing them and how that would fit in with their plans. And then it gets down to, and sometimes we've had those discussions like, okay, it's my land, I should be able to do what I want with it. But that's not always the case. So we always have to walk that fine line too.
Other thoughts from the committee?
I think I've about exhausted mine. But no, I did offer an amendment, and it was second, so that's where
We
we're
do
at.
have
is-
that. You're right. So we have a motion made and a second with an amendment to specify from EA2 or primary ag and limit it to one transfer per receiving property one time.
One time, yes.
But that does effectively mean, these guys were just talking about it, that somebody could potentially buy a 40 and not be able to build on it.
Correct. That's my biggest hangup in the whole thing.
Because then there's no density on the one that you transferred it from.
Correct.
So it's a blank.
hole.
It's just a hole then. Yeah, that's a great, okay. That's news to me. Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Verge, you looked like you had something you'd like to say.
And I'm not sure if I'm thinking along the right lines, but okay, so there's no density there. So there's no zoning there. So then what can come in there? Anything?
I think we call this a paradox. What you're basically saying is that if you have a 40, there's technically one density. You transfer it away, the 40 has no density, yet the ordinance requires each parcel to have a building site. So you have a paradox if you do allow it in that scenario. That would necessitate the need for the affected parcel that would lose density to be in excess of 40 acres, which means you would have to be at least 80 acres in size to comply with both aspects of the ordinance and alleviate the paradox.
To me, it gets
I'm
pretty-
struggling with supporting that idea, now, having that information and thinking that through. That seems ill-advisable to me.
And
To have the potential to have a 40 without being able to build on it, and then also have conflicting.
you have to have 80 acres to build. How many people can have 80 acres?
Well, technically, this would be 70 acres minimum. We like to keep referring to solid 40s, but how many people can afford it? Yeah, that's a good question. But then again, it depends on the zoning type. If it's a exclusive ag zoning or a primary ag zoning, in theory, there is supposed to be ability to build a house on any type of zoning. So I guess that's in the eye of the beholder.
I guess it just feels very gray and muddy to me after having talked through this, to the point that I don't think it's advisable.
I have a question. So is the town of Albion's goal to protect the farmland?
Keep it in ag as much as possible, yes.
Okay, but in this case, whether you transfer density or whether you give them a rezone, there's still gonna be a house built there, correct?
The result is the same.
So the
But one-
farmland, in essence, is not protected because there's still gonna be a house there.
But there could be one
Right,
house rather
correct?
than four, I think or two houses versus four.
Depending on the density they transfer. We're not gonna grant a rezone.
Sherry, I think you need to come to the microphone if you're gonna talk.
I guess I'm a little unclear on what you're saying, because we're not doing the rezone. So if you don't transfer the density, there won't be a house. Is that right?
Not quite true either.
You're not quite sure of me or her.
What you said about that, if you don't grant a rezone, there wouldn't be a house.
Well,
Okay.
because they can't transfer the building rights, and
If, from what I understand of our code, is that we have the authority to grant or deny a rezone. You don't
Correct.
have to approve for us to approve.
correct.
So if this person would want to rezone, they can do it, and without your approval. That
They can
is
do
an
it
option.
with
It can
your
happen, yes.
approval.
And
Yes.
we would approve it, and we would basically supersede the town's wishes. That's what this committee does.
Yes.
Which is what we conceded when we went along with full county zoning instead of doing our own, which we discussed at length,
Yes.
doing our own, not go with the county.
Fun, huh?
Getting back to what Joe had said about, you said that every property, just flesh that out more about what you just,
Our ordinance speaks to every parcel having a building site. Now, when we talk typically new parcels. We don't talk about existing parcels. Obviously, if you have a parcel that's 2 feet of water, that's an existing parcel. But if you tried to create a new parcel out of that, you couldn't, because it doesn't have a building site. So each parcel has to have a building site. So in this particular case, if you transfer density from a 40 across the road, in theory, they have one density. If they transfer it away, they have 0 density. That's the paradox. We are basically allowing and revising one part of the ordinance to contradict another part of the ordinance, which of course is the cardinal sin of zoning ordinances. Not that it doesn't happen, but it's, you try to avoid it at all costs.
We do have a motion on the table that we should vote on, which is, we'll restate it again, to.
Can
Sherry,
we
did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to address that. I believe if the county road wasn't in front of this property, it would be acceptable to build there. Is that correct? There is a county road. I know, that's what I said. But if the county road wasn't there, it would be acceptable to build on this piece of property.
No, really what type of road is there?
Not a county road, a road.
A road.
I'm just saying it is a county road. But if the road weren't there, it would be perfectly acceptable to build on this piece of property.
Oh, so what you're saying, if there was no road dividing the two parcels?
Correct.
You're correct. If this was,
Owned
if
by
they were
the
trying to
same,
build,
everything's owned by the same landowner, but there is, it doesn't matter what kind of road, but there is a road in front of it. And if that
through it
road,
Effectively, correct?
Pardon
Actually
me?
goes through the parcel, because it's on two sides.
I think what
The
Sherry's
same
trying
no,
to,
it's a 40 on one side and then the rest of the farm on the other. But if that road weren't there, he could build on it without any of this going on.
also, if they wanted to build on the other side of the road, we wouldn't be here, because there's plenty of density to do that.
Right.
What you're speaking to, I'm assuming, is that roads divide parcels.
The road divides the parcel off, but also on the other side of the road, it's, there's, no, it's like a hole.
But then we're getting back to that this is for a specific instance and not an amendment for the.
And our job is to,
Well, I agree with that, but I see more instances like that down the road. And in this, particularly in this situation, the road is what's changing it. And, I mean, I even look at my own property, and there are places on mine that without transferring density, I do not believe you could do anything. Not that I plan to, ever, but it affects a lot of people with our terrain and makeup of our township.
and that's a restriction that is applied by the zoning that it has, which was your desire. So
Right,
it is what it is.
with the ag. I mean, we're an ag township, but
Right, it is.
we're full of hills that we have to work around, and the ag people have to work
We have a
around.
vote on this one. Okay, let's call a vote on the motion to restrict it to EA2 primary. What's it, in one-time
Exclusive ag 2 and primary ag.
correct. So that is what we're voting on right now. All in favor of that language, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
So,
The amendment failed, correct?
correct. So with that being said,
Okay. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, a great discussion and a lot of great questions, right? I think there are so many questions and so much to consider that I know it takes more time and it goes back to another public hearing and things, but just to reconsider maybe the thought of more internal discussions and coming back with a solid plan so that you have something solid to work from going forward and what maybe we're taking from this meeting and we can help move that forward, just to throw out there.
I guess I would like to re-motion the idea that we give this further research and consideration and bring it back to our next meeting.
Okay, we have motion, we have a second.
Second.
Okay, we do have a second. Any discussion on this?
I think we pretty much talked it out.
Yeah. Okay, well, for the sake of spending a minute or two, staff have been aware of this for a long time. Staff is well aware of the pros and cons of this. It's up to us to make the decision. Could I get staff to give a pretty short thought on what we're doing right now before we vote on this?
Well, I mean, my understanding was, this last motion was the language we probably would have altered, to bring to the next public hearing, but that didn't go through. So, I mean, I don't know what more we can do other than what was made at the last motion about putting in those 2 or 3 items.
Which was kind of why I wanted to just have you say some comments on it. Verge, do you have anything to offer?
I mean, the other motion,
Joe?
Stand with it was taken out for a reason.
Right.
And I mentioned earlier some of the reasons that it was taken out.
and I think,
Joe? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that I think that the other option here, instead of, if we don't feel like we need to research this further, then the other option is to put a motion on the table to not do this.
Correct.
Is
To
really
not-
what
Not
we're
add
at.
the language back in.
Right.
Joe?
But Joe, yeah.
I believe in flexibility, but there are walls everywhere. In this particular case, I think the issues we brought up and the fact, like Verge says, that we did it for a reason, makes a lot of sense. The things we aren't talking about in resolutions is how do we guarantee that we can advise the public properly no matter what we have? Currently, we advise the property very simply with what we have. You have the density, there's no transfer. In order to do what some of the members want to see happen, and what Sherry is talking is we have to devise a system that works so we can advise the public properly. So short of just going, let's go with 2 ag zonings and 1 density transfer, we also have to talk about creating mechanisms to keep track of this. And the people that would probably have to be involved in creating that aren't here. So without their input on this and a scheme or a plan that encompasses all our needs and not just a part of them, I think I would be suggesting we need more time. And at that time, we probably will come to conclusions a little bit better, should it happen or shouldn't it?
That is what I needed to hear okay, that provides clarity and a
guess-
direction that you guys can work with other staff to put together the systems that can help with this. And then we'll go from there.
Reason for the first motion.
Correct.
Yes.
Well,
Got it, yep.
okay. Any other discussion?
So there is a motion on the table.
Correct, and seconded by Stacy. So, motion is to send it back to staff, revisit, dig through all the things, see if they can find a way to make it work. Okay? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
I'll be in favor. We'll send it back.
And then Randy, which way did you vote?
Yes,
Send it back?
yep. Yes to Dawn's motion.
Mm-hmm. I think it's 4-1 or 2, I don't know.
Randy, which way did you vote? Send it back or
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
75?
Well,
After all that.
mm-hmm. Okay, so that language will be removed from our resolution today if we proceed with the rest. So at this point, we're gonna send this back, and we have amendments to chapter 4, section 407, different camping cabin definitions and that to discuss next. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Joe.
So you'll notify us of the next, it goes back to hearing, right?
Yeah,
Well,
it'll be posted
yeah.
and whatnot, so.
Same procedure as
Will
this one.
is it feasible to do that in May, or are we, because you guys gotta get your discussions and then you gotta post for 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think the public hearing notice is probably, the deadline might be within the next week or so.
And that's
So I
what
mean, it
I'm-
might be the June,
And that's why I wonder if, it probably is looking like June really
right,
for.
I would say yes, you're
discussion.
correct.
Shit's gonna hit the fan.
Well, I will remind, there is an avenue by which this person can go by building a house currently in place. We are not impeding that. We are doing our due diligence with our
I'm
zoning
not
code.
agreeing with, I'm just,
So, there is an avenue to go in place.
Yep.
We have to do things for the right reason for all places, so. Camping and cabin definitions.
Well, this was brought up by an individual that, was looking at using camping cabins versus campgrounds. So it was kind of brought up by an individual, but it would come into play for any existing campgrounds or future campgrounds. That a camping cabin was just never identified when the ordinance was written. It was all tents and campers and trailers. So this is just adding camping cabin as a camping unit to have in a campground. That's kind of it in a nutshell. The changes are making reference to the definition of camping cabin and also making more reference to these campgrounds are licensed, through the state, through Administrative Code 79. And I also did add, the first item is, down the road, if someone wants to do a campground, they should be coming in for a conditional use, just so the neighbors have a say on what's moving into their area. As of right now, it's a permitted use. So, the existing campgrounds that are in place wouldn't really affect them so much other than having and that could go for the county park too. The county park could, they went down the road of putting up a bunch of little cabins for some reason or another, or at Champions, they've had and then those are probably the two major campgrounds we deal with. And then these individuals, that's all they were gonna have, there was these camping cabins, but it would fall under a campground. They'd be required to be licensed, and then the cabins would be inspected, they have to be built to a code. That's kind of what this is doing, it's just adding one more type of a camping unit to what's existing in our ordinance.
So for them to operate, they need this change?
The ones that brought it up, that's what they strictly wanted to do, was have
Is it that
cabins.
Trempe Outdoors?
It's a property in the township of Arcadia.
Because they're already taking reservations. They've got stuff all over Facebook and,
Well, I guess I didn't know that, but I
Yeah.
guess they put in the cart before the horse, but they
Yeah.
have talked to us.
yeah, they've got
Through all this
package deals
process, so.
for Ashley for.
They haven't turned anything in as far as, a permit to put up one of these
That's
things.
curious.
Little cabins, I think.
This isn't the one by Newcomb Valley, this is a different one.
Oh.
That one, there was a permitted campground.
Which one is Trempe
I think that's the one by Newcomb Valley.
That's the-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he came through, he got, proper septic and all that, and he was told it was a permitted use because it was in that zoning district. I'm just saying that in the future, maybe we should have a conditional use requirement for a campground instead of one just popping up like this one did.
Sure.
And,
This would provide language for us to deal with.
right, I mean, in the camping cabin itself, it's just adding, these cabins are limited to 400 square feet. They can't be like a mansion, they're pretty tiny, and they are required to be built to a code. They can't just put up a she shed in the back 40 and call it a cabin, I guess, so. And I guess the town, I haven't had any public input, all the townships were notified as they were with this last one, and nobody's had any input. I just think it cleans things up a little bit and allows people to have a little bit more flexibility on what they want to use their campground for.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the new languages recommended by staff. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion, if any. Hearing none, no questions from staff or any of the members? Okay, motion to approve the recommended definitions and amendment to our ordinance. Say, all in favor of recommending that, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Opposed? Motion carried. So we will add those. No, those two are quiet. Do you have a thought on definitions and whatnot with?
Otherwise, say
I
abstain.
haven't been researching that, so I'm making no vote.
Okay, abstain? And you too, Tony?
Okay, I think that finishes that item. So, item number 8, zoning update. Mark?
I just got one question for Susan. I guess this resolution that I had has chapter 3, 4, and 18. 4 and 18 is what was approved. Can I still circulate it to sign it? Or should I write up a new, I mean, I could just take 3 off of here.
We just need to remove 3, and then it should be
So I can
fine.
circulate the resolution here, or should I remove it and then have everybody sign at a later date?
We should remove 3 and then
Okay.
have everybody sign, and I think everybody's gonna be here, you know, I think whenever the Tuesday meeting is too. Well, I suppose 2 of you won't be,
Okay,
but let's have the.
just wanted to clear that up. I guess it makes no difference to me. but-
Yeah,
And I guess as far as zoning updates go, I mean, as of right now, you know, I'm sure there'll be some more discussion about housing, but we've already brought in 17 building permits, 12 single-family dwellings and 5 duplexes, you know, already this year. And I did reach out to, as far as the discussion on the slope of a driveway, I did send out an email to every fire department asking for their 2 cents on it, and not one of them responded back, I guess. There was a conversation that someone had, and they were more concerned about like a switchbacky type driveway than a straight steep driveway. So I tried to, you know, get some input from the actual fire departments themselves. They just never responded to the emails.
How long ago was the email sent?
I'd say 2-3 weeks ago or something like that. And then also, I did send out an email to a GEC representative that we want to discuss contract, and I haven't received anything from them either, you know, but I sent it to them like twice within the last 3 weeks, so I think it's just gonna have to, I'll just call them and say, hey, what's going on, you know, but.
Sure.
Yesterday, obviously, was an election, so some townships were having their people come in and making comments about other people in their township, you know, as far as junk and all that. That's just something we're gonna have to crack down a little bit, a lot more than what's been done in the past, and, because it's the same people all the time when it comes to that stuff. And that's just more of a legal thing, and hopefully we can take them to court more often, I guess. I can't really think of anything else as far as zoning update goes.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Next up will be Haley. Okay. All right, thank you, Verge. County cost share request.
Yeah, let me pull this up, because it's a lot of numbers, so I figured probably easier just to look at it. This is what we had discussed in February, changing it to bring you guys up front instead of at the end of the cost share practices. So right now, I am in the process, along with Rick and Morgan, of designing and getting the landowner to sign on the design. So nothing has been designed or nothing has been bid out as of yet, so that's where we are sitting with these projects. There is, I broke them into new, I should have done kind of a bolder line in between those, and then the carryover just from last year so that you guys can see that as well. Since those have not been technically approved for payment, so I figured I would bring them to today because they are still in the process of getting completed. So kind of going down the list, so we have a waste storage closure, and that's in the town of Ettrick. Again, these are going to be, I'm gonna caveat this of, these are estimated costs because they have not been bid out. So these will change. I will not say they won't. They will change. And then I did so the total cost on the left, and then the estimated county cost share, which is that 70% rate. And then I also did the potential funding source that it could be coming out of, based on different standards and restrictions that are put on. So I think I'll go through all of them instead of doing, each one saying yes or no, yes or no. And then we have Gale, we have a grade stabilization. This is actually a rebuild of one that was placed in 1983. It has now been eroding from the back and the pipe is now falling off. So that is one that does need to be repaired, otherwise it's going to be completely blown out. So this is the time to do it instead of when it's really bad. That one's gonna be a county cost share. We have 2 critical area stabilizations. One of them is their toe walls, so it is kind of like a spillway coming in, and the berms around them are eroding. So we're using a critical area to reshape and reinstall those berms to ensure that those toe walls are functioning properly. The other one is more of a waterway type, but with the conditions of that, it falls into the critical area instead of the actual grass waterway standard. We have a potential one. I don't have a cost on this one because it is still in the potential works. In Chimney Rock, it's a stream habitat and stabilization, and that is one with multiple partners. That's why I don't have a cost as of yet. So that's an NRCS and Trout Unlimited and us. So I don't know what our part of that would be. But we are trying to move forward with that one so that we can keep improving the trout streams and getting more trout easements on these properties so that public is allowed to access them for the trout fishing. Then we have 2 bluff prairies here this year. We have one in Dodge, and these are all going to be U.S. Fish and Wildlife led, so they are the main contact for these projects, and then we are following up with potential funding and then just being out there as far as like a contact and resource for the landowner and getting our name out there as well. So one in Dodge, one in Ettrick. And then we have another one this year with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. This is a newer one to our region, is the wetland restoration. So I'm really hoping this one goes through because I think it would be a great project to start installing and rehabilitating more wetlands within our county, because we do have a lot of pocket ones around the county. That would also help with the wildlife, the waterfowl, everything like that. So there's a lot of different benefits to this, and it's also a great, wetlands are just great to begin with as far as water quality and even groundwater quality too. So those are all the new projects that we have right now coming down the pipeline and in the design phases. Carryover, so these are going to be ones that were designed and bid out. So you have all the change in here. So these are the ones that have been bid out because they were last year's. So we carried them forward because of all of the crazy weather and contractors last year. So more grade stabs from last year. Because of the drought, we were not able to have correct conditions to install grade stabilization structures. So We have one in Gale, two in Dodge, and then the other ones are going to be grass waterways, Ettrick, and then we also have the lake management plan from last year. I can't remember all my years, they're all different time frames, so I have to remember when we, so this, we needed a matching fund for, so that's why there is a designated 5,000 from the county cost share. So we are working on implementing that lake management grant. Morgan in our office, along with myself, will be doing a lake monitoring this spring. So we're going to be doing a, why is it not coming to my brain? Like the vegetation surveys, that's what I'm trying to say. So we have to do one in the spring and then one in the fall, but DNR's technical terms of spring and fall are very different than what we think. It's actually like June and like late September. So I don't think June is spring, but we'll go with it. And then that's where we're going to be using some of these matching funds, and eventually we'll be creating an actual management plan. And then the last one there is going to be a nutrient management plan, so we're using the DNR SAG funds, and a new implementation of a nutrient management plan. So we signed the contract late last year to have it implemented over the winter, or developed over the winter, so that we can pay it then this year. So, and then at the bottom, we have our, I just put in total available, total allocated, and then the remaining. So I'll probably be looking for another 1 or 2 projects to help utilize the rest of the bond funds, and lower the county cost share funds as well. This does not include cover crop contracts, or any of the nutrient management farmer education contracts. That's a whole nother grant, and that could be about 40 different contracts, so that's why I didn't put all of those on there, and I don't know all the whose it is and everything like that. So that's where I'm sitting as far as conservation projects. I would entertain, if you guys have any questions, discussion, want more information on the projects, but I would like a motion one way or the other on proceeding or not
forward.
proceeding on these projects.
Thoughts, questions from the committee?
Looks like good work.
Yeah, so,
Interesting to see new projects, new types
Yeah.
popping up.
yep.
Is there something online that says how to qualify for the wetland restoration?
I
Since
do
that's a
not
new
have
thing to us?
something as of yet. I do actually, in the last 3 weeks, I have had, I think, 3 other landowners call me about wetlands. So I don't know if all of a sudden people are realizing wetlands are a good thing or what. So this is something that is definitely starting to get highlighted more. So I want to get something on the website. And I'm working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife because they are a wonderful partner on this.
Very good.
I guess the question I'd have is, since we're under new leadership, how much authority does this committee have in authorizing funds for some of these projects?
Yeah, has anything changed?
I can speak to some of it generally, and I'm not intimately familiar with all your grants, so
Yep.
I think a key question would be is, what does the grant say? And follow what the grant says, because sometimes grants will be more specific to county boards, and sometimes grants have more flexibility, so that's always an initial, thing to consider. What I understand that Haley is asking for is just generally permission to move forward, and I think that's well within your
I understand the
range.
grants, but I mean, the county share part of it or whatever, I mean, that's, I guess, where my question was directed to.
And I don't have enough understanding to have you designated these funds already? Has that been
No,
budgeted?
that's why we're here. Unless
Well,
last
no,
year's.
they are-
They are in the budget?
They are in the budget.
Okay.
This is completely in the budget, that's why I have the total available at the bottom.
Right.
So that is going to be what we have budgeted for, and allowed by the county budget. So I'm operating within our budget. Previously, personally, I don't know why all the cost share payments were brought forward to this committee. I don't know the history on that. I don't know if it was just for the purposes of, hey, knowing what's going on. It may actually have been stemmed back from like the 1970s of when they actually had an official checkbook and they wrote the checks here at the committee. That may be where it stems
And
from.
that just went away, because I just closed the account in the
Yes.
last 2 months, I think,
Yes.
so. That might be where it stems from.
Honestly, that's thinking about it
Probably
now, it's
pretty
probably where
logical.
that stems from. So I am just bringing this forward to make sure that the conservation department is moving in the direction of what the committee is looking for as far as the practices being installed on the project, or on the landscape. So,
And I would say as long as that was like planned and that it's been budgeted for and going forward, I think in the new budgeting cycle, I'll be much more aware of other things coming, but
Yes.
as long as it's been budgeted and it's part of the plan, I think that makes sense.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, move to approve.
I'll second that.
Second by Severson. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Next item then is, excuse me, is our conservation update from Haley.
yeah, I can close this down. So conservation update, let me get that piece of paper up. Okay, so I'll try to run through this quick here. Conference went really well. So last month we were all at the conference during our committee meeting. So that went really well. We all took away a lot of information, a lot to think about, and we had some really great discussions at the conference. So we are all very thankful that we were able to go this year. Then at the conference, we had the speaker, the youth speaker, and she ended up taking first at the state competition. So that was Delilah Solberg from GET Middle School, and her title was A Fishy Tale in Trempealeau County. I do have a recording from the area contest that has been shared on Facebook, and I can always share that out to you guys as well. And she did a wonderful job, so it was
My niece,
exciting.
very proud of her.
She's a good speaker for sure.
Yes, it was very fun. And then we also had a poster there, and that one took third place at state. That was Carmen Palulas from the Osseo Fairchild High School. And her poster was beautiful as well. I actually am probably going to be printing it off and putting it on my door because I really like it. So it was awesome to see Trempealeau County being represented at the state competition and placing very well. So nutrient management plans are due April 15th. So that is, I think, next Monday? No, the following Monday, I think.
Yeah.
So Rick has been working with producers to get those implemented and finished. So then he has been working on that. Tree and shrub is coming very fast. So the pickup is April 18th and 19th this year because of the early spring we had. And apparently that was winter. So I hope those dates are still going to work because I don't want to change it again. So that is going to be held, again, pickup is at Petrick Park, April 18th and 19th. So that week is going to be a very busy week for conservation to get things all packaged because I think we have 230 orders this year or something, which is quite a few. So it will be great, and it's a great resource for the landowners, so which is really exciting. The funds from the tree and shrub kind of tie into my next one is the land judging contest is coming up as well. So spring is a busy time, and that is going to be held on May 10th. And the host school this year is Whitehall, with the host farm being in the surrounding Whitehall area. So I can't give you specifics because we want to make sure that it is not given out too far in advance because we don't want students to know what all the soils and everything are. So we have to keep that a little bit of a secret here. So I may be reaching out, or actually Morgan, because she's the one planning most of this, looking for potential volunteers on that day. So it's a Friday, May 10th. So just as a heads up there. And then we talked about the projects. So those are coming along. Thank you for approving those. We will be, I'm hoping to get them bid out here in the next couple weeks. So we are definitely busy running like crazy. So, and then last plug here is Rick has implemented a new timeline for the cover crops, and the application now is going to be due on July 15th. This gives us time to process the paperwork, get a hold of everyone, verify that they are planted and then coming up before we pay them. Last year they were not due until like October, So it just didn't leave us enough time to get things implemented. So we are implementing a new timeline this year. So just wanted to give that little plug of July 15th for the cover crop application, and that is on our website to have that applied for. So we've been getting a couple already, so, which is exciting. That's all I have. Questions, comments, concerns?
Any questions for Haley? Hearing none. Thank you.
Perfect.
Keep it up.
Thanks, guys.
Keep up the good work. Dave Carlson's here for a housing initiative update.
Yeah, let me start just by looping back on this thing that Andy Todd had brought up at a previous meeting. He put me in contact with a builder who's doing a couple of projects down in Galesville, and he had a concern about electrical inspection rates. And as he explained it to me, and I did some subsequent follow-up, is apparently, you know, communities, cities can decide to have their own, you know, set their own electrical inspection rates and be responsible for that, and then have somebody do that work on their behalf. Or if they don't take that delegation to do those electrical inspections, and there's other inspections that they can take delegation for, but if they don't, then the inspections need to be done off of a state list, and the state bids out, I guess, this work to other contractors. So he was giving the example of Galesville being a city that declined to have that delegation, so he's got to go off the state contract, and City of Blair, where they had taken that delegation. So City of Blair has a different rate, and it was lower than what the rate was that applied to Galesville through the state contract. So he was kind of trying to say that the county should take a look at potentially seeing if they could do countywide delegation for that kind of work, which he thought would provide a lower rate for those services. I did do some investigating with the state Department of Safety and Professional Services. They're the ones who bid this out, you know, where there isn't delegation. And it is possible, like Eau Claire County has delegation for, I think, all of their townships plus a couple of the municipalities, I think the Village of Fairchild and I think Village of Fall Creek. So that is a possibility, but what I kind of realized at that point was that would be something that, you know, the county would have to have some communication with municipalities about, and that would be a lot of work. So I just wanted to close the loop on that one, let you know that I did investigate that. If it's something the committee would have some interest in proceeding, you know, I could do some more investigation, but I do have some contacts down at DSPS now that I've made in looking at that issue. Other than that, I just wanted to update the committee on a few of the communities that are working towards affordable housing or housing initiatives. In Osseo, I will just mention that, does everybody know what a TID or a TIF district is? Is there anybody that doesn't? I can give a quick explanation. Okay. So Osseo terminated their TID number 2 in 2022. Before they did that, they passed a resolution as allowed by state law to extend the collection of funds, taxes in that TID by 1 year for the purpose of creating an affordable housing fund. And that generated $800,000 for them. And then that kind of gets put aside, and then the residual balance left in the TIF after taking that money out is what's redistributed to the taxing entities, city, county, school district, technical college. So City of Osseo is a little bit ahead of the other communities I'm going to talk about in the sense that they have created the fund, they've got the money, and they had Cedar Corp out of Menominee develop some affordable housing program guidelines. And basically what their program does is creates an affordable housing construction loan program that housing developers can tap into to bring down the costs of development. And it's pretty flexible. It can be used for land acquisition. It can be used for extension of utilities to serve a housing development, et cetera. The thing I'll just mention too is that housing, to meet the definition of affordable, so to be applicable under state statute means that occupants can't spend more than 30% of gross monthly income on housing-related expenses. So that definition's important. Arcadia has a TID number 4, which is set to expire this year. I went to a meeting of their common council a couple weeks ago, and it looks like they are leaning towards also doing that one-year extension to create an affordable housing fund. In their case, if they do that, it would create a fund of about $676,000, which could be used for affordable housing. Again, it does require a municipality to pass a resolution to extend it for affordable housing. What it does do, and this is the case in all of these communities, right, is when they do that one-year extension for affordable housing, it does delay the redistribution of excess TIF funds back to the taxing entities that are involved in that TIF. So in the case of Arcadia, and I'm just throwing it out there because you should be aware of it, when that TIF closes, if they do this affordable housing fund, $158,000 of their balance would be going back to the county, $148,000 to the city of Arcadia, and then $163,000 to the school district and $30,000 to Western Tech. And this is more information than maybe you need. There are restrictions on what communities can do with that. They can use half of the money for any purpose, and I think the other half has to go towards tax relief. It's one-time money that comes in, and so they don't want it all, the state doesn't want all of it jacking up budgets that, are not sustainable for the future. So Arcadia is gonna vote on that in April, probably at their next council meeting. And then in Galesville, Galesville has TID number 2, which is set to expire this year. It was primarily a residential TIF on the west side of town, the Ridgeview Estates neighborhood. Again, the council's considering a one-year extension on that one. If that happens, it'll be a $235,000 fund for affordable housing. And in that case, it would delay redistribution of excess TID funds by 1 year. That would be $211,000 to the county, $228,000 to the city, and $290,000 to the school district. And I'm expecting that was going to happen next week, April 11th. So Becky and I had talked a little bit about housing and how do we move forward. I think a couple months ago, I had proposed potentially forming a work group and had a composition of that. Becky and I talked after that. And I think the plan, and Becky, you can jump in, is, we wanted to wait till after the election, see what shook out with, changes, and then reach out to the municipalities primarily, and see about convening a meeting with whoever wanted to talk about what we could do collectively to work together. Obviously, some of these communities, Osceola's got some tools, potentially Arcadia, Galesville will have some tools, and then see what we can do to maybe leverage those tools with some other things and make some connections with developers to get going. Becky, anything you want to?
Yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up nicely, and I think the Osseo, in my conversations with the mayor and clerk there, I think they're well-situated already and have some things in play. And I think it could be helpful to gather the village of Trempealeau and Arcadia and that southern area in talking about options. I think Osseo has some, at least at that time, had some other conversations about possible developers to work with. So I think, we have some opportunities to bring communities together to kind of talk about possibilities and hopefully provide some resources for them.
Yeah, it's just really good timing because Osceo's a little bit ahead, but Galesville and Arcadia potentially are following right in line here. So I think it's much easier to work with communities where we're not doing separate, we've got a sort of a common language and common ground, and they're in the same place.
Good. Very good. Good info. Item number 12, future agenda items. Anything from the committee?
Yeah, I do. At our PTED meeting yesterday, Buzz Sorgi brought up some questions about what is being done surrounding agritourism. He mentioned that he had been to a really good convention or conference recently that spoke about, it's Climate Smart Commodities, I guess was the conference. And there was just discussion as to whether or not there has been any action taken in the agritourism realm. And I think we understand that, agritourism falls under economic development and tourism, but because it's agriculture, it also falls under this, umbrella a bit too. And so we just wanted to put that on the agenda. Maybe we could invite Buzz to come and speak to that, or we talked about whether or not we want to pursue the joint meeting at some point and have that be an agenda item. So I just wanted to throw all of those things out on the table and see what stuck.
Probably hasn't been really enforced since Olin Femright left. I mean, he was a big promoter of that in the county. I mean, he did a lot. We'd drive buses, but now with biosecurity things with farms and avian flu, I don't know where that would stand, but I mean, it can be up for discussion, but.
I think, Dave, you're part of the agritourism at the state level.
Yeah, I'm actually a board member for the Wisconsin Ag Tourism Association. I've been a board member now for about a year. And, right, so there's that one view, Tony, of agritourism and visiting farms and stuff that I think you would naturally associate with ag tourism. But it's really broader than that, and under the ag tourism umbrella is things like, the apple orchards, wineries even, dairies, any, there's just a wide, alpaca farms, there's a wide range of things like that. And primarily what WATA, W-A-T-A, has done is, they're very engaged with looking at what kind of changes might need to be made in statutes or local ordinances to allow ag tourism. So it is definitely the kind of thing that potentially intersects with, an Environment and Land Use Committee. I will tell you, in 2 years I've been on the job, I have not really come up with any conflicts, from businesses or, ag operations that want to have tourism with not being able to do that. But those conflicts do exist. Wedding barns is a classic example. There was some legislation that came through last session that passed that put some more restrictions on what wedding barns can do, how many events they can have to have a liquor license, all that kind of stuff. So those are just the types of issues that do surface that relate to ag tourism. And I do think it's, being a primary ag county, with a long tradition on that, it is an opportunity for us with ag tourism.
There's been some bed and breakfast proposals around too, or whatever, that people have had some ideas, but.
So as far as a future agenda item, though, like, if we put it on the agenda, I guess I'm not sure, I would have to look to Dave or somebody else to, bring forward information about that, but are there things that this committee and/or the PTEC committee should be doing, if we have the time to do it, would be one of the things to think about too, related to, I don't know, grants related to agritourism or other things that might be beneficial to our county?
Well, I would think we are just starting right now where we're working with Jack and Dave and myself to the broader view of economic development tourism. And so that'll be a part of our strategic planning as we go forward. So maybe if you'd give us a little bit of time, we could bring forward some thoughts and a plan that we're, that we'll be putting into place as we move forward.
Yeah, I'd like to do a little bit of outreach to some of the, some of the businesses, potential ag tourism businesses in the county, and see if there's things that they can identify that, are barriers or that they would like to see.
And we had really, one of our initial things that we want to make sure is that we have an inventory so that we have actual known, like what are all of the assets that we have. So that's just a piece in the puzzle that we need to put together as well as we're planning. So if you would like we could do a report if you give us, we're April, May, if we would report, we could give an initial in May.
That'd be fine. And I do believe it'd be a great topic for joint meeting, which now that we've been through election, we haven't established committees yet moving forward, but I assume many faces will stay the same. But time will tell.
Potentially set a joint meeting sometime this summer, I would think.
I would say June or something.
Yeah,
maybe.
June, July.
Yeah. Okay. Only other subject I'd just like to see an update, and maybe if Land Records is here next month, maybe just get an updated county solar map.
lease.
Just see what's, are things changing or are they more or less the same?
Sure, and then we got 3 public hearings probably scheduled for next month, be 2 rezones and a conditional use permit.
Throw the new
season.
people into the fire.
Just the season.
Okay. With that, our next meeting date is set for Wednesday, May 1st. Any issues with that? Hearing none, we will stick with the 1st at 8:30. Thank you, everyone. I will adjourn the meeting.